855-450-3733. Let's go to the phones and the fun. We've got John listening in Nevada to LRN.FM. Hello, John.
Hi, guys.
Hey, welcome.
I don't want to be taken as defending the policy that Kim Davis wants to be enacted, but I hear a lot of libertarians criticizing her, saying, well, she's not doing her job, as if that's a criticism in and of itself. So I would just like to remind libertarians that in most cases, we don't want government officials to do their jobs, because usually to do their jobs is to do something bad. So if a cop was, say, not going to arrest people for smoking pot or for carrying weapons peacefully, then I don't think libertarians should be saying, well, he's not doing his job and he has to go.
No, I see where you're coming from. However, you could argue in that case, though, that the policeman is doing his job because all police are given discretion.
Well, they're not given infinite discretion. They are supposed to enforce. They're supposed to enforce laws, and a lot of the laws they're supposed to enforce are wrong. And there's a lot of other things that other public officials do that are wrong that we would prefer to see them not do.
Yeah, but they are given discretion, and they pretty much can use it in any case, with the exception of a few felonies, I believe. I'm not sure exactly the details on the things that they aren't supposed to use discretion on. But, things like drug possession, they absolutely can use discretion. They can look the other way, and that is part of their job.
Well, the other thing that you've got of this is that whether it's a police officer or anybody else, these people have oaths of office. Okay?
That's true, too.
And I've actually got right in front of me, if you want, I'll read it out loud. I've got Kim Davis's oath of office right in front of me here.
Okay.
And it reads, I do solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of blank, insert office here, according to law. And I do further solemnly swear or affirm that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state, nor out of it, nor have I sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person in thus offending, so help me God. Now, listen to me. The fact of the matter is if her job is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the laws of Kentucky, then telling the Supreme Court to pound sand is exactly what she was supposed to do. The Supreme Court had absolutely no authority to cram gay marriage down the throats of Kentucky voters. That was not something that these people voted for. It was not something that they wanted, and it's not a power of the United States federal government to go and define marriage for people. So she did exactly what she was supposed to do. She was doing her job, and she's being jailed for it in order to scare the life out of religious people in this country. It is an atrocity what's happening to Kim Davis.
That's an interesting perspective, Chris. I hadn't thought about it from that direction. John?
Well, that's, what Chris said is well and good. It's also not a legitimate authority of state government to legislate marriage either.
Of course,
So
I'm not standing up for marriage licenses in this case. All I'm saying here is that this is an edict from the federal government, okay? And if we're talking about the context of the situation where, if we're going to, let's just pretend for a second that governments have legitimate authority, right? And it's not just a bunch of guys with guns. Let's just pretend that there's a legal system here. There's a legal system that's based on a constitution, and that constitution is supposed to limit the power of these authorities. And that 10th Amendment right there says, hey, you don't have powers that are not defined here, and marriage is not one of the powers defined. And so for the federal government, for the Supreme Court to turn around, and because the politics of the sitting justices say that gay marriage is just a swell policy that we all think everybody should have, well, we're going to go and cram this down the throats of everybody else. And all these leftists, all these people, love wins the day lunatics, will probably tell you how wonderful democracy is when they're not out subverting it through the court system and jailing religious people for enacting their beliefs and upholding the Constitution of the government under which they work.
Okay, just curious, Chris, if she changed, let's just say it wasn't the feds who did this. Let's say Kentucky went ahead and, legalized gay marriage. If she continued to refuse, would you then say she should do her job?
If she's working for the state of Kentucky and the state of Kentucky legalizes gay marriage and she refuses to carry out the orders of her, quote unquote legitimate government, well then that government should fire her from her job. Not doing your job is a good reason to get fired from your job. It's not a good reason to throw somebody in a jail cell.
I agree with that. She definitely doesn't belong in jail. John, any other thoughts you want to share?
Well, yeah, I would say she definitely doesn't belong in jail, especially since there is a clear legal procedure for removing her from office peacefully. So it's stupid. A judge should have looked at that and said, "There's nothing for me to do here. You have a way to take her out of office. Take her out of office if that's what you do."
Thanks, John, for your call tonight. Appreciate hearing from you. Our toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. So let me just summarize what you just said and make sure I understood it right.
The state of New Hampshire legalized gay marriage. I did not blink an eye, okay? When the federal government turns around and crams this down the throats of everybody in all 50 states, I hit the roof over that, okay? I'm not anti-gay, right? I'm not. If people want to, get into a relationship and call it a marriage and sign a contract, have at it, okay? But the federal government turning around and seizing a massive power like that is so ridiculously offensive to me, and it should be ridiculously offensive to anybody who cares about freedom. I lost my mind when I saw libertarians changing their profile pictures to rainbows when the Supreme Court made this decision. That was the most ridiculous thing that I have seen in the history of this movement, and I have seen some ridiculous things come out of the mouths of libertarians. This was awful. This was a huge power grab on the behalf of the federal government, and that's what you're seeing in the case of Kim Davis, that they're like, no, we have a pro-gay agenda, and we will jail you if you defy us, and that is sick and dangerous.
It's scary for sure. And you also can look at the cases with the cake makers or whatever.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
There's like a gay couple coming in and they want to have a cake, but the person doesn't want to make the cake because of whatever objection, and then all of a sudden they're being forced to by some government board or some bureaucrats under the threat of violence, and I think that's absolutely horrifying. Please stop saying that love is in any way involved in this situation. I don't think there's any love on either side.
Because the ideologues behind this, it's a hate group, okay? That's what it is. It's not love wins the day. It's not, we just want to love each other. No, you hate other people, and you're going out and you're using violence against them through the state, and you are suppressing the religious majority of this country. For all your talk about
and you're an
democracy.
Atheist.
Yeah, I take no pleasure in standing up for religious people. Believe me when I tell you, okay? I hate that I'm in this position where I'm compelled to do this because I don't like it. I think religion is child abuse in those sorts of circumstances. I think it's one of the most deleterious influences that we have ever had introduced into human society. But I also say that it's even worse when you're going to have a government turn around and promote what is essentially an anti-breeding agenda. Like, hey, everybody be gay. This is like better. Do that. And if you don't like it, well, we'll throw you in jail.
So what's happening outside the courthouse? Kentucky.com reporting from Ashland, where Rowan County Court Clerk Kim Davis, or not court clerk, I keep saying that, Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis has gone to jail. Carl Guyman Jr. says justice has been served and love and equality has prevailed. Close by, hundreds of those who supported Davis stood silently. Others prayed and sang hymns. In the hours leading up to the decision by District Judge David Bunning to jail Davis for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, the two groups yelled, preached, and chanted on the sidewalk, sometimes exchanging heated words. Dan Ruchinsky held a sign that read, "America, God hates your sin," and used a portable microphone to preach to the hundreds of people who had arrived hours before the 11 a.m. hearing. Like I said, I see a lot of hate on both sides of this. I don't think anybody here is really standing for love. Our toll-free number, if you want to share your thoughts, 855-450-FREE. The lady that is in jail right now, until further notice, Kim Davis, the Rowan County clerk, there's a lot of different, I think, viewpoints on this. And Cantwell, I got to say, yours is an interesting one. You say that she should have been disobeying essentially the order to issue these marriage licenses because the decision by the Supreme Court, in your interpretation, was unconstitutional, and she swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, so therefore she's within her rights to not follow those orders.
It's within her duty to not follow those orders, frankly. You're going to have the United States is a foreign government to Kentucky, okay? When these people start turning around and doing things that are outside of their constitutional authority, the word marriage never gets mentioned in the Constitution. That's complete nonsense that the federal government has any authority over it whatsoever, okay? So if the same thing, when the Republican candidates get up there and say they want a ban on gay marriage, right? You know, and you've had Republican presidential candidates talk about this. They rightly say, we have to have a constitutional amendment if we want to ban gay marriage, because we don't have the constitutional authority to do that in the Congress. The Republican Party, who has not been friendly to the Constitution over the years, mind you, knows that they have no authority to ban gay marriage. And these religious zealots have enough common sense to get up there and say the only way that we could do this is with a constitutional amendment. But the left, they're like, constitutional amendment, that's what the courts are for. Yeah. Right? And they go into the courts and they say, well, we've got just the right people in there. We've had just enough Democratic presidents over the years that we can get a 5-4 decision out of this and cram it, stick it to those reactionary, conservative, religious zealots once and for all. Right? And that's what they do. And it's sick and sadistic that they do it. It's a really terrible thing. And like I said,
this is what government does. It turns people against each other.
I did not blink an eye when New Hampshire legalized gay marriage. I didn't think twice about it. I said, fine, what do I care? Right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's been fine. Everything's
when it's
been great.
The federal government does it, they have no authority to do that. So when they cram this down the throats of Kentucky citizens, and the citizens say, we did not want this, and then the people that they elect to office turn around and say, no, federal government, we're not going to do that. Well, then they should be sticking by this woman. The Kentucky courts should be saying, go pound sand, SCOTUS. The Kentucky legislature should be demanding that she be released.
This was a federal judge who did send her to jail for contempt.
Then the state authorities should go break her out of prison, is what they should do, because she's been kidnapped illegally.
Well, you and I both know that the state government goons will not do anything against the federal government. Of course not,
which is why they're fundamentally useless.
Right.
You got a foreign government jailing your citizens over powers that they don't have.
They'll get their funding cut if they don't do what they're told. There's so much money that comes from the federal government with all these strings attached to it for these local and state governments. They are owned lock, stock, and barrel by the federal government.
And the other thing to this, as you mentioned when we came back, she's in jail until this is not she's gonna spend 30 days or she's got some penalty coming to her.
It's an open-ended sentence.
She's in contempt of court, and you know what? They're not going to let her go until she changes her mind. So this woman's got religious convictions.
Until she agrees to fill out these forms or whatever.
They're not going to fire her. They're going to hold her in jail until she renounces her deity. I mean, how sick is that this is happening in the United States of America?
Well, it's pretty crazy. I'll certainly give you that. And it comes back around to a point I made when we started the show about this, and that is that when you join up with the state, you've changed your religion. See, this is something she doesn't really realize, and most people don't realize it either. The state is a crazy, dangerous, hate-filled religion. Yeah. And if you are truly a Christian or truly somebody who's supposedly, because a Christian is supposed to be somebody who emulates Christ, and, Christ was a loving person who, was not a violent person, etc. By joining the state, you're joining a criminal enterprise that is essentially its own religion. Look at the trappings of the state. You've got, in the courtrooms, pews. You've got icons, religious icons that people will chant in a very religious manner. They'll chant a pledge to this religious icon.
And they'll stand up for it.
They'll stand up for it. They put their hand over their hearts. And, and if you are a Christian or any, a lot of religions would not like you to be worshiping something else besides their God.
It's absolutely. It's idolatry. They were pretty clear about that one.
So she, in my opinion, threw away her religious conviction when she decided to take a job with the state and do their evil bidding. Although I think you make some solid points, Chris, that, if she had a conscience, she should go ahead and exercise it, and I get that. And I think that this whole situation is just messed up from top to bottom. You've got two different groups, the religious zealots in this case. You've got the gay marriage folks who want to cram it down people's throats. They're all fighting with one another. And it's a perfect example of how the government turns people against one another. And it pits interest group against interest group. And then eventually what's happening is, one group gets control of whatever state apparatus or federal apparatus, and then they shove their views down the other group's throat. And then the other group gets in control of it, and it's like, oh, well, we got screwed over for the last 50 years or, 20 years or 10 years or whatever. Well, now we're going to screw you back. And then it's, it's just like back and forth over and over again.
And anybody who thinks that this is helping gay people is out of their minds.
Yeah.
You are going to see, you're already seeing it, but this
The backlash,
this
right?
is huge, okay? You know, when you talk about conservatism, a lot of people refer to it as reactionary, right? Okay, they're just trying to maintain the existing social order and income these people who just want to upend everything and create chaos in the social structure, right? And so they're going to react, okay? And I'm finding myself in a position where I'm looking at all this stuff, and I end up, you know, I was really far more interested in discussing economics and stuff like that, and I'm seeing all of this social issue stuff being shoved down everybody's throats, and I've gotten to a point where I am reacting to it. I'm behaving like a reactionary. I'm taking a more conservative line because I'm just like, what the heck are these people doing? And a lot of people are starting to go through that they're like, okay, well, I'm a libertarian. I don't care about gay marriage. I don't care about abortion. I don't care about this, whatever. And then they're seeing what these people are doing with the state apparatus to shove this down people's throats, and they are reacting to it, and they're angry, and they're going to do something about it. And when these people get control of state apparatus, don't think that that's going to help gay people. It's going to be a disaster.
That's a great point. Our toll-free number tonight, 855-450-FREE, 855-450-3733. But what does it even mean to be held in contempt? I don't think a lot of people really know. I mean, they don't even understand what contempt is.
Bad news.
We should talk about that, too. It's Free Talk Live. This is Free Talk Live. We will not hold you in contempt. We don't have that power. In fact, the idea of contempt isn't even a legislated thing. It's just a power that, you know, these judges have by virtue of the fact that they wear a robe. They can just send you to jail for an indefinite period of time for whatever reason they darn well feel like. That's contempt.
It is established in law. I'm actually looking at the federal contempt law here in Title 42.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's Chapter 21, Subchapter 1995. And it appears to me here, it says, in all cases of criminal contempt arising under the provisions of this act, the accused upon conviction shall be punished by fine or imprisonment or both. Provided, however, that in case the accused is a natural person, the fine to be paid shall not exceed the sum of $1,000, nor shall imprisonment exceed the term of 6 months. So it appears to me that there is an upper limit on this.
Except, here's the thing with the upper limit. Now, I don't know what the federal law is on this, but at least in most places, my understanding is if it goes beyond 6 months, the judge just simply has to explain himself. Like, he can be called into some sort of committee or whatever. There's some sort of oversight panel of other judges who will call him in to explain himself, or like maybe you have to petition for that to happen. I'm not really sure exactly how that works. If you're an attorney or you know a thing or two about what happens beyond that 6 month time frame. So generally you will see judges not handing out more than 180 days for contempt, but if they do, they can still get away with it. It's just that they have to kind of give their reasons to some other judges before they'll sign off on it. That's it. You can still put somebody in. In fact, there have been people held in contempt for years and years.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I read a little bit further, and it says, this section shall not apply to contempts committed in the presence of the court or so near thereto as to interfere directly with the administration of justice, nor to misbehavior, misconduct, or disobedience of any officer of the court in respect to writs, orders, or process of the court. So it seems to me that this limit that I just uttered might not actually be the case.
Right. There's a way around that, and so the contempt power was just sort of this Western judicial system thing.
Yeah, but it's a near plenary thing. Like, I mean, it's like an absolute. It's an awesome power to basically jail anybody who you feel has disrespected you.
That's exactly right. We've had our friends jailed for contempt. I've been jailed for contempt, and in my case, I didn't sit down fast enough. That was my reason for getting my first contempt charge. Another contempt charge I caught because when I was the court trial was over, I was fined $120 and asked if I could pay it, and I refused to answer that question, and so I was hit with contempt for refusing to answer that question.
Wow.
I was hit with another contempt, I think, because it was some other piddly nonsense reason. You know, just a bunch of junk. You know, wasn't like I destroyed the courtroom or anything like that.
You have the right to remain silent and not be a witness against yourself, unless, of course, the judge asks you a question, in which case he'll throw your butt in jail.
Right, because I wasn't being a witness in that case. I was just being sentenced. And so, yeah, I went to jail for that, and it was a 90-day sentence. So I got 3 contempt charges, so 30 days apiece. The actual sentence for the case was 4 days. So I went in, and in that case, these judges just want to be obeyed. They just want you to bow to them.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, that's what I decided to do. I'd gotten word after the weekend in jail that the judge was going to give me a right of allocution hearing because he apparently forgot to do that at the first moment of the contempt. So this right of allocution is your chance to beg, basically. This is your chance to explain yourself in the instance of contempt. So the judge is obligated by the system to give you that right of allocution. So because he supposedly forgot to do that, they had a video arraignment where I was able to, beg and eat some crow in front of the judge, promise to be a good boy in court and follow the rules, and he let me out as a result of that. So the 90-day contempt went down to 0 days after I gave the judge what he really wanted.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the thing. It is a means by which to coerce compliance.
That's it.
And so there was the case not so long ago of this woman who they wanted to circumcise her son, if you might recall, right? And there was all these intactivists, as they're called, the anti-circumcision activists, and they had managed to put this off a number of times. And eventually they said, sign the order allowing your husband to have your son circumcised. And she said no. And they said, fine, you're in contempt. And they put her in jail. And they held her there
until she signed it.
Until she signed it. And they called that her agreement.
It's voluntary.
You have to agree to this or we'll jail you. Well,
now see, wasn't the whole circumcision thing, wasn't that part of their original marriage agreement or something when they were going to have kids? I can't remember why he was pushing it so much on her, and then she decided to change it.
I have a hard time imagining that circumcision was in a prenup. Right, but
right, I know, but it was some weird thing that he wanted done, and she was okay with it, and then all of a sudden she wasn't okay with it.
She got to finding out about circumcision is what happened.
Sure, yeah.
She went looking into how much of that skin they were removing, how many nerve cells are in that, and all the deleterious effects that it has on a male body.
Yeah, exactly. Circumcision's a horrible thing, but yeah.
Yeah, and so once she got red pilled on circumcision, she went loony, not loony, but went radical on it and was like, no, I won't let you do this to my son. And she kept him away from the father, and then she was charged with custodial interference and all this stuff. And eventually, what they did was they held her in contempt, and they said, well, we can't circumcise your son without your consent, ma'am. So we'll just hold you in jail until you consent.
They did the same thing with Jim Johnson. He's an early mover here as part of the Free State Project. And there was a multiple mass civil disobedience kind of arrest thing that happened where I was arrested and 11 other people, including Jim Johnson, were arrested for basically being at the jail. We hadn't trespassed or anything like that, but they had told us to leave, but we hadn't heard the message that we were supposed to leave. And then when the cops showed up, they just arrested everybody. Everybody went to trial, and almost everyone was convicted except for one guy. It was all the same evidence, and so why the one guy didn't get convicted is another question. Well, it was because he had a different judge, so it's proof that's completely arbitrary system. And Jim Johnson, when he was convicted, he actually got convicted of a misdemeanor count, and I think he refused to fill out. Oh God, was it? I forget what it was that he refused to do. I think he refused to fill out the financial affidavit because he claimed he couldn't pay a fine or something like that.
Right.
And because he would not fill out the financial affidavit, he was put in jail for contempt. And he was going to be held in contempt until he did what the judge told him to do. So this stuff happens all the time.
Yeah. It's not an uncommon procedure. Like the people who are really outraged about this happening to Kim Davis, wake up to the violence inherent in the system and that they do this to people all the time.
Right.
And you might be more upset that they're, basically, compelling her to renounce her deity. But, this shouldn't happen to anybody, ladies and gentlemen. You tell somebody that because, just some guy in a robe, some dude in a dress told you to do something, and then you're going to be jailed until you comply with his order. And it's not even something that's necessarily established by the legislature. It's not something that's established in the Constitution.
You can't repeal contempt.
Right.
It's not possible. There's no statute. I looked it up. I looked for contempt in the statutes of New Hampshire. It doesn't exist. You can't. I don't even think that you could. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if they did a constitutional amendment. Maybe then you could do something. Let's go to Donna in Washington, listening to KMAS. Hey, Donna, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hi, I just had a comment.
Yeah.
This woman down there, she's such a Christian and believer and stuff like that, but I just heard on another radio station earlier that she's been married 4 times.
I've heard that she's been divorced twice. She might be in her 3rd marriage now, is my understanding of it.
From what I understood was that she divorced husband 1, married 2, divorced 2, married 3, divorced 3, and remarried the
2.
second
Oh, she's
guy.
had 3 divorces then.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 2 divorces.
But she
Okay, so-
remarried her second husband.
Yeah, so,
supposedly.
and look, I'm not surprised to find some religious hypocrites in the world, right? I mean, this is going to
Oh,
happen,
yeah.
okay? I mean, I've said before, it's the straights that are destroying marriage, no question about it. Stop with the sanctity garbage. But at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, to go throw somebody in jail because they believe something is sick.
Hey, Donna, you probably were going somewhere with that, so stand by. We will come back, talk to you, and you can join us here. Our caller did just drop off the line, so I apologize about that. Would have loved to have heard more about what she had to say. Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE.
I will just, the thing that she was bringing up, is Danica had mentioned it during a break, is that the woman's been divorced a bunch of times, right?
The clerk.
Yeah, the woman who's being jailed, Kim Davis or whatever her name is, she's been divorced several times, and now she's trying to play holy roller for, God's will in the marriage, and
She's a hypocrite.
Right, and there's no shortage of that, of course, right? I mean, it's straight people who are so concerned about, the sanctity of marriage, while they run around on Ashley Madison and run up their credit cards getting guaranteed affairs and prostitutes. They're a bunch of lying pieces of garbage. But at the same time, it's a thing that my problem here, and it should be the problem of all Americans, frankly, is that the Supreme Court is just completely out of line. So a 5-4 decision. Most of these things are 5-4 decisions, right? All these really, controversial issues are the Supreme Court deciding right down the middle. It's a split decision where almost half the court disagrees with the decision, but they've got 9 justices on the court, and so and once
Because 5 people agree, now the Constitution means this.
Right. They're legislating from the bench, plain and simple, and that's absolutely blatantly illegal, and nobody's going to do anything to stop it. And it just goes to
They're
show
not going to enforce on
what
themselves.
a horrific system that we have in this.
But it's the best system in the world, Chris.
I'll tell you what, it just might be compared to other places. But now, but in order to say that, you've got to compare yourself to places like North Korea,
yeah.
Right? I mean, look, the human condition is not like a pretty thing for the most of the world, right? I mean, the default human condition is rather violent and terrible and chaotic. And so the fact that, the United States manages to have a system under which we live in a relative degree of comfort, even if we do so with a boot on our neck, is and by many measurements, a miraculous thing, and I won't deny it. But it's absolutely the judicial activism in the courts is gotten to such a point that I shudder to look at it. I want to read a quote from Thomas Jefferson, actually, real quick. So he says. The Constitution meant that its coordinate branches should be checks on each other, but the opinion which gives the judges the right to decide what laws are constitutional and what are not only for themselves in their own sphere of action, but for the legislature and executive also in their spheres, would make the judiciary a despotic branch. Okay? That's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. He saw this coming quite a while ago, okay? And this is the problem that you've got in this country where one of the many problems. Don't get me wrong. We've got our problems in the legislature and the executive, no doubt. But the judiciary is supposed to, and the reason that these are lifetime appointments in the Supreme Court is specifically so that they are not, subject to the whims of politics, right? They're not worried about winning the next election so that they can make unpopular decisions and they can overturn the rules of the legislature and the executive, right? But what happens is they are put there for political purposes. You have presidents making the appointments based on ideological reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution, and they go and they shove these things down the throats of the entire country. And then in the lower courts, then somebody goes and disobeys the higher court, and they just say, "Oh, okay, I'll hold you in jail until you consent, until you go along with our arbitrary edict." And there's just no check on that power whatsoever. Nobody can spring you from the slammer once you've been held in contempt of court. And now they're going to hold this woman until she renounces her God.
It's so sick. And I think you really summed it up there, Chris. And I think that if there's anything valuable that comes out of this whole Kim Davis situation, that it is that people will learn a thing or two about contempt. If you're paying attention to this story and you didn't really know what contempt was, like you just seen it in the movies or whatever, Now you know a little bit more about this. Now you know what you're dealing with in these courtrooms. These men and women who wear these robes have unlimited power, nearly unlimited power to take someone you love and put them in a jail cell forever. Our friend Sam Dodson, well, not you guys because you probably never met Sam, but he was an early mover for the Free State Project, has since moved away, found a different path in life. But he went to jail here for 58 days for contempt for refusing to give his name. Now remember, you have a right to remain silent. Apparently, that right to remain silent doesn't include you not going to jail because of your remaining silent.
You have the right to remain silent in your jail cell.
Exactly. And so, the real kicker was that when he was in there, I think it was about 2 weeks in, the police were able to figure out who he was. And I don't know, they ran his prints or whatever. They somehow did their investigating. They figured out Sam's name because he was in as John Doe up until that point. So they knew what his name was. But He stayed in jail for 58 days. He stayed in for weeks longer than that, another month and a half, until he was finally kicked out the side door of the jail one day, still wearing his jail orange. They didn't even make him change out before they sent him out of that jail. So I don't know who sent what notice to who, but all of a sudden they decided they didn't want him there anymore. Thing is, they knew who he was.
I've been kicked out of classier joints than this, you bums.
And they even gave him all his stuff, like the stuff from the cell. So he came out with this big tote full of all the detritus that he'd collected while he was in jail. We had him in here that night, and it was a long time ago. We had a crappy webcam and terrible lighting in here, but you could still see him sitting in the studio, sitting where Danica's sitting right now, in his orange jail jumpsuit from jail. It was pretty entertaining, but the thing is, they kept him in that jail because he didn't tell the judge his name.
Right.
So even though the police did the investigating and knew what his name was, and all of it was on file, the jail knew, everybody knew what his name was. The judge certainly knew what his name was at that point.
It's just an attempt to
pure
obtain
obedience.
The obedience, just
pure
to get the compliance
obedience
out of them.
Yeah.
And Jefferson said it a long time ago. It is a despotic branch. This is a law that was created by the judiciary, enforced by the judiciary, punished by the judiciary. There is no statute anywhere.
It's not even a law. It's just a power.
I mean, aside from contempt, I'm saying there's no law that you can read that defines marriage as whatever, that says you have to give two men a marriage license, right? This is a thing that was done by the judge. This is not in the codes anywhere. This is a judge's decision and a judge's penalty. There is no statute which we say what is the maximum penalty for failing to grant a gay marriage license. That doesn't exist. So all you have is this plenary authority from the top to the bottom of the judiciary going out, and it's judicial activism at its worst. It's horrible.